Okay, we're going to jump into devlog number 2, Godot Buttons. I've put together a document here. You can see I wrote it back in May, but I've been pretty distracted and busy over the past couple months. So that's why that you see this gap between the first video in January and the Godot work that I've done then. I haven't really been able to make that much progress, but I do want to check in here with another devlog to make sure I'm documenting the process step by step, and to just check in and give me a jumping pad going into the next step of development. So first up, just some quick updates. This year my daughter turned 1, so we celebrated her birthday. That's been taking up a lot of my time, just spending time with the family. Raising a kid has been quite a challenging experience, and I feel like it hasn't been able to give me much room to do actual game dev quite yet. So I'm still trying to figure out the proper balance there and where I'm going to be able to put time into working on this project. Secondly, I did apply to a couple more game dev product roles. I've been on the job hunt for quite a while now, trying to find my next role in product management in video games. I did get a chance to interview at a couple studios, but nothing really has come up quite yet. So let's just jump into the actual meat of this devlog. So basically, back in January, I did start a Godot project for this incremental gacha game. And here's a little screenshot that I wanted to share with you guys of the first iteration of what I would call a basic layout of interaction. So basically, I just tossed together this one scene to get to familiarize myself with the node system and the UI system within Godot. And I've placed together the elements that I've wanted into the game as interactable buttons on the screen. So if we want to walk through it, let me zoom in a bit here and see how close we can get. So to just walk through what are the elements we're seeing on the screen here, keep in mind this was the first version, first pass at putting this together. So I was really just throwing ideas down, putting the text down, putting the buttons down, basically translating what I had in the game design document that I shared in the last devlog, and then translating that into interactable buttons in Godot. So just reading across the top here, heroes, these are the heroes that you win from your gacha. Charms, this is sort of the feature idea around consumable timed bonuses that would increase your luck. Then Nova constellations, this was the skill system where you would get Nova points for prestiging your gacha heroes. You can see in the heroes column, there's a button to Nova the hero that would reset their level, grant you Nova skill points that you would be able to spend in the constellation system. Then I had a section for research. This was basically your skill and progression tree, where you'd be able to spend resources and research and unlock upgrades. After that is the Arcana system, basically a card system that would allow you to get additional bonuses based on a card draw from a deck. And then lastly here, Compendium and Craft Compendium is a collection system to let you know how many cards, how many characters, how many collectibles you've gotten from each collection in the game. So this is what we're going to use to give players long-term progression and goals. And then the craft was an idea about using crafting mechanics to convert the gacha pools and the items that the player is going to get into other items, right? So it's kind of like a recycling, salvaging system for lower tier gacha rewards, and then an upgrading system for higher tier gacha rewards. So there would be like a crafting system built around that for players to use in order to make the less desirable rewards that come from gacha sometimes into more desirable items that the player can actually use. And then in the center of the screen, we have the central gacha interaction, which is, tap to gacha. What I have here is a button where the player can select how many gacha they want to open, the quality of the gacha, sort of are they opening lower tier or higher tier boxes and getting higher chances at better rewards. And then a bunch of tap buttons. So I was kind of imagining like presenting the player here with a visual of multiple chest boxes, multiple things that they can tap, so that they can try their luck at different gacha, right? So the player wouldn't necessarily be limited to just one single button interaction. I want to put in some variety there. Let them have a choice of what to tap, and then see the consequences of their luck with different options. On the left side, I have a section called Game Time. This is, I think this was a timed progression system that would allow players to open gacha in an idle style of mode where the progress would happen automatically. So there'd be a waiting period of say 1 to 2 minutes or 2 to 5 minutes, depending on the complexity of the gacha that you're opening or the level of your opening ability, let's say. The game time here would let the player open gacha without being active in the game. They would be able to wait for the gacha to open by itself and make progress in an idle style gameplay. The last 2 lines of text there are basically where I wanted to surface status updates, like gameplay updates, any text that would show up in this prototype to tell the player like what's going on in the game, what they've gotten, what they've won. That would be set there in the gameplay updates line. And then see gacha rewards would be where the list of gacha rewards would appear. Then on the bottom here, I have a section for types of gachas. So that was a selector to let the player choose what type of gacha that they want to get. And this would be a shopping system where the player would have a wallet full of gold and funds, and they'd be able to spend in the shop to buy the type of gacha they want to open. So the types I have here as an example are gacha capsules, gacha loot boxes, booster packs, which are more tied to card systems, chests, which are more tied to usually equipment or RPG systems, and then a couple of different interaction options to let the player choose to buy multiple batches of gachas at once. So the 1x, 2x, 5x, 10x, and max, that sort of design is seen in a lot of idle games where players will want to spend their currency in order to buy something, buy an upgrade. But since the progression system scales fairly quickly within idle and incremental games. We want to give the option to players to buy multiple upgrades at a time or multiple gacha at a time, because they could end up getting a wallet with a ton of gold, but having to click, let's say 10 times, 30 times to buy something is going to cause fatigue, right? So we want to include these systems to make it more simple, make it more easy for a player to just make a quick decision and spend all of their currency on one thing. At the bottom of the screen, I do have this minus and plus button. The idea here was to give the player a selection mode to choose what tier of gacha they want to purchase. So lower tier, you can imagine that lower tier gachas are going to be cheaper and then also provide lesser or fewer rewards. But upgrading the tier would require them to spend more currency for each purchase, thus increasing the cost, right? So they'll have to spend more gold, but also increasing the potential rewards, right? So these tiers of gacha would scale upwards from tier 1 up, let's say, to tier 7 plus, and players would be able to move through this progression system where they start the game pulling mostly tier 1 gachas, using those for upgrades, and then eventually being able to amass enough currency to buy higher tier gachas. If in any case the player ends up, running out of currency, then they'll revert to, going back to buying the more inexpensive gacha boxes. Auto roll with a bunch of speed up options. I'm not going to go into too much detail there. And then lastly, here on the bottom right, just a bunch of numeric stats that would be nice to present to the player. So how much gold they have, how many heroes they have total, kind of a luck score, which is a number just to let the player know how much they've progressed in terms of luck that they've amassed in the game, and that would be one heuristic for progress in this game. And then gacha speed. Gacha speed was an idea about quantifying how quickly a player would be able to purchase gacha. So one gacha per minute is the example here. But if this game is going to develop in that sort of incremental and idle kind of game progression, then as the player gets better at pulling gacha, you can kind of summarize and tell the player how they're doing by telling them how many gachas they're able to pull every minute or so, right? So you can imagine a player with a lot of upgrades pulling 100 gachas per minute, 100 gachas per second, and then just constantly getting those rewards from the automated system. Yeah, so that's sort of my first foray into Godot at this point. I was really just using the control nodes here on the left. You can see everything sort of set up in this hierarchical system. I'm still figuring out how to best organize all those elements. And then the next step is really going to be attaching code to the game systems and making all these interactions actually interact with a gameplay system, right? So we're going to have to build out the gacha roles, have that connect to the HUD and present to the player and tell them what rewards they got, update the list of heroes that the players have unlocked, and so on and so forth. In my notes here, I have worked and written out a list of sort of things that I've been thinking about, things that I want to work on, moving on to the next stage in this progress. So just to summarize again here, we're going to go through this short write-up here that I put together last month. This was a screenshot that we just went over from January 14th. I'm thinking of it as like a control panel style game system as a first step in building a prototype. So instead of doing like a lo-fi of like the entire flow with different screens for what might appear in the final game, this type of prototyping is trying to simplify the prototype style into its bare bone minimum, right? So we just have one screen, we have all the elements visible on that one screen, and we're building the game in its most abstract form, which is buttons, inputs, and outputs and feedback for the player, right? And then underneath that is the code that runs the game logic. So the base layer is minimal, playable, just text, limited art, no FX really. One screen layout of buttons and menus and text display, and the full game loop is going to be visible at a glance, right? So we want to be able to look at this one screen, this one control panel, and mentally be able to walk through how the game plays in the player's experience, right? So we're going to be able to walk through the player's journey, but in a mental way. Ideally, once this prototype is done, it's going to contain all potential game interactions. And then once the code and interaction is attached, the game is going to be playable from this one screen. And the development and the next step basically goes from here to layering visuals on top of this prototype system. And then just to talk through like what mental discovery means, it means that we're going to be able to iterate on the game before any code is written, right? So just taking a look at this control panel here and all the buttons, I'm going to be able to walk through what a player touches, what a player presses in the game, how they interact with all the game systems, and then what I expect to happen as they play and press through that. So visualizing each interaction in my playtest will be going through rehearsing and miming a player, using my imagination to think about how someone plays through it. And then as I play through it, I get to discover my expectations of like what is supposed to happen in the game loop, and then flesh out any undercooked ideas. So if there's anything missing in what I expect to happen in the game, I can go back and add and work on that, right? So I can update, reconfigure the systems, rename them, switch things around, and even decide what to cut. Okay, and these are just the notes on what I was thinking. I've sort of walked through it when we talked through that screen. So it's just going to be a list of what we had on the screen there. And here's the version 2. All right, now we can go into the second part of the devlog, talking about the second iteration of this control panel prototype screen that I was working on. So I did a second pass on all the HUD elements here, adjusting things as I went through and did a couple of visualizations of the gameplay. So you can see here the core of the gacha game is preserved in the center, like having the player select the gacha, tap to open the gacha, but a lot of the surrounding elements and features have been adjusted based on the new ideas that I've had and things that I've discovered as I was thinking about how these features would interact with each other. So across the top here, we still have heroes, we still have charms, and so forth. But I've made a couple adjustments to the way I think about how constellations work, how Arcana works. collectibles here, I've expanded it to show different collections. And then the crafting system I renamed to alchemy to more suggest that a player would be able to take any junk items that they have or stuff items that they have from their gacha pools, so things that they don't really want or are not valuable, and take that and let them transmute it to gold, which they'll be able to recycle and respend into the economy to buy more gacha pools. And lastly, on the top right, there's an encyclopedia section. My idea here is to give players more information about the status of their game. So things like loot tables, the availability of power-ups, a calendar system, and putting the game settings in here in the corner as well. Then on the left, here with the auto roll, we had the automatic progression system in the previous iteration, but here I expanded it to show that it was possible for a player to have multiple ongoing automatic progression at the same time. So there's three rows of progression bars, and these meters would fill over time, and they could be different types of activities, like flipping coins for income as one example, or an automated opening of certain type of gacha. The shop system at the bottom has mostly stayed the same, but with a couple more updates and additions. So I've added a couple more types of gacha. I've changed and added a random system to let the player choose to buy a random type of gacha. And then I've moved the gameplay log text to the very bottom here. So there's a couple of lines here saying there's a gameplay log. We want to have feedback, any text-based feedback placed here for the prototype. What kind of gacha is being opened, what the player has gotten from the gacha. In the center of the screen, that gacha button has really stayed the same from the previous iteration. I've changed the copy and the text a little bit. So now it says tap to open the gacha. In my ideation, I'm still thinking about how the player interacts with gacha. Left click, right click. There's a couple different options for different types of interactions the player can have with the gacha. Say we want them to have an ability to open the gacha by clicking on it, or a special ability by applying maybe a skill or spell on the gacha to upgrade it. Those are kind of things that we might consider adding. And then on the right side, there's a quests system. So I've added this as a way to try out an idea around assigning heroes to automate progress in the game. So to summarize, that was a screenshot from February 25th, the second pass on the control panel. I've sort of already gone through this list of changes as we talked through the screenshot. There's a tapping to clarify action as opening gacha, buying gacha. We had upgrades to the shop. We added a gacha opening progress meter, renamed that to auto roll system, and then had a couple of progress bars available for the player to play with. Assigning heroes to help you open a gacha, that's more of like a management sim addition to the game. Having unique gacha that require summoners might be something that we want to do. So these are some ideas that are additional that I've been thinking about. Then there's a quest and job board system. These would be hero activities, adding additional ways for a player to use their heroes. So having more heroes means that more quests can be actively progressed. That's some way that we can scale the game up with the number of heroes. Hero level, hero stats like level, rarity, affinity, luck is going to come into handy with these questing systems and let player aspire to level them up to get better stats if they're going to be applying these stats to the quest. But one concern that I have here with the quest system is that it needs to differentiate itself with the auto roll, as they're both like kind of automation systems within the game as a whole. Heroes are going to require manual level up once duplicates are acquired. That's just giving the player more agency and giving them a point of progress to play with the game. So we want to actively acknowledge that they're making progress with this level up system, and possibly include a wildcard upgrade material that can be applied to any hero. Constellations, spent and refunded, we talked about that. Upgrades, renamed from research. I'm still questioning if the timed progress on research is necessary. Timed progress is very useful in spacing out progress in idle games, but if this is going to be more active management sim, then maybe having that timed research is less necessary. I had an idea about the Arcana cards displaying in a spread instead of just a list. Then we added automation panel, we changed stats, we added new stats like drop rates, a luck rating. But in this V2, what I'm getting and what I'm feeling is the game is starting to feel overly complex. So we're at the point where we've added enough ideas and added enough features to make the game interesting. But once we build the game out, we're probably going to have to cut back or simplify certain parts of the game to reduce complexity and tighten the game experience. So what are we looking at doing next? Definitely the next steps here are to build out the code and interactivity, possibly do a third pass on this control panel. I think third pass will come as the code is being built out and as I'm able to play through the prototype with interaction. Then I want to hone the gacha grind, change the feeling, add in the feeling of saving up enough for your next 10x roll. I think that's a really core part of the gacha experience. What else do I want to do? Simplify gacha collection, consider different mouse inputs, explore this idea of spending big and winning big to encourage players to put down larger wagers on their gacha, right? You want players to be going for the higher tier gacha instead of just playing with the basic rewards. And then a couple more points here, just income expense model, things to think about. I just have a list of ideas to walk through. I'll be working through these as I build out this prototype. I think a lot of the next steps for this project are just to really figure out, get comfortable in Godot, build the prototype out, play test it myself, play test it with others. So I feel like we are going to be making good progress. My plan is to jump back into Godot this month and spend more dedicated time on this project in order to get things going. Definitely one thing I have to do is set up version control, and I think that's going to be what's going to kick off basically the part 3 in my game dev journey here. Part 3 is going to be getting that version control set up so we can officially have a repository for this Godot project, and officially, having version control and committing that first version of the game makes it feel a lot more official and more concrete as like a starting line, right? So I want to lock in what we have right now. I think it's a good jumping off point, and we're going to be having a lot of fun in the next month or so building this out. Another thing that I've been working on the side is designing these heroes and designing these characters. So that's definitely something that I'm going to be really excited to show you guys once I make good progress on that front. I've already started on piecing together a lot of the initial sketches and ideas in my sketchbook, but I'm not quite ready to show that to the world quite yet. And we're not at the stage where we're not at the stage yet where I'm going to be putting that into the game, right? But I'll be making progress on that as well in a parallel track, more on the design and art side, thinking about what the characters are going to be like, their personalities, what kind of world we're going to have to build out for these gacha characters. So yeah, that's it for the second vlog. I hope you enjoyed listening to my breakdown of all the things that I've been working on here and how I'm thinking through this project. And I hope it gives you some insight as to my development process. And if you're interested in following along for the journey, make sure to like, subscribe. I'll be keeping up with these updates as much as I can. Thank you.